Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is redeem, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis, so a special thank you for that suggestion. Anyone watching is welcome to suggest a verb for future videos as well. But now let's take a moment and look at some of the ways that we use the verb redeem. The first way you might hear redeem used can mean to do something that compensates for the bad aspects of something, for the poor past performance of someone or something, or for the poor behavior. So, to help us understand that, that can have a lot of different meanings, but this is something I have heard a lot as I have watched sports. And so, perhaps earlier in a game or competition, someone makes a mistake. Right, and the other team is able to score points, right? Later on, if that same player makes a great play, you are going to hear this verb used, right? They are compensating for their earlier mistakes or those bad aspects. A second way, and kind of connected to that first definition, our second definition says to atone or make amends for something bad. So this really tends to focus on people, maybe recognizing I didn't behave or I didn't act in the best way. Maybe I did something bad. I hurt someone physically or emotionally. And here it's not only apologizing, but really trying to say I'm going to do better going forward. A third way redeem gets used is in connection to many religions. And the meaning here is generally to save someone from sin or evil, right? So, again, this gets used in a number of different religions, but that idea of atoning, right? Sort of acknowledging one's shortcomings, the sin, and trying to make amends for that. A fourth way redeem gets used can mean to gain or regain possession of something in exchange for payment. Okay? So you might think of really that action of paying for something in order to get something else. Related to that fourth definition is our fifth definition, to exchange a coupon or a voucher for merchandise, a discount, or perhaps for money. I feel like we hear this used a lot in connection to points. So many retailers, businesses have different systems that give you credit for being a regular customer. And after you accumulate maybe some points, you can exchange those points, or maybe you get a paper coupon or something of that nature, and you might get a discount. You might get something for free. A sixth way redeem can be used means to pay the necessary money in order to clear a debt. You might think of like paying off a loan, paying off a mortgage. For now, you should know that redeem is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms redeeming. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, redeem, ends in a voiced M sound. This means our ed ending is just going to make a D sound, and I'm not going to add an extra syllable as I say it. So, the past tense and the participle forms should sound like this: redeemed, redeemed. Okay. Might be happy to know no phrasal verbs that we need to study, so let's go on and review some verb tenses with our verb of the day, redeem. Today we're going to talk about the past perfect and the present perfect. We'll begin with the past perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about a completed action. But what makes it a little bit different than just the simple past tense is we're noting this action occurred before a certain point in time, or before another action. Okay? To make past perfect sentences, our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. And that's because we're going to be using the past form of have, which is had. There's just one past form of that verb. So in the affirmative, you're going to use start your sentence with your subject, use had, and then the participle form the verb. Let's take a look at an example. One person had redeemed over $700,000 in gift cards before the scheme was discovered. Okay? So here, we've got that idea of using gift cards, right, to get something, kind of going back to those earlier definitions we just talked about. But here, with that use of scheme, probably means this was not on the up and up. It was not a legal thing, but this was a plan in order to essentially steal from someone or some other organization. That had redeemed is, again, there because we want to note that action occurred before it was discovered, right? That's our second action that's occurring here. Now, let's look at negative past perfect sentences. To do this, we start with our subject, we use had not or hadn't as a contraction, and then we use that participle form the verb. An example of this: he hadn't redeemed his mortgage before his death. So that's going to go to that last definition of our verb. So this mortgage, this debt, still existed at the time when he passed. Now let's take a look at a yes or no question in the past perfect. To do this, we start with had, then we're going to have our subject, and then the participle form the verb. Here's another example. Had the character redeemed herself before her death? This is a question that gets asked many times as we analyze literature and kind of look at all of the actions. What kind of character do we have? Do we have someone who's generally doing good things? Do we understand why? Maybe they're doing bad things. And here, maybe we had a character that did some things that were not so good, but kind of before this character died, were they able to compensate for those bad acts? Were they able to atone? Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the present perfect. Now, this is a verb tense where we need to pay attention to our subject, right? So to make sentences in the affirmative here, we're going to be starting with our subject, and if that subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to use have, and then I'm going to use the participle form the verb. But if my subject is he, she, or it, I'll use has, and then the participle form of the verb. You might be asking kind of what's different here about the present perfect. Well, sometimes we use this verb tense to talk about completed actions, but they're generally actions that occurred at some unknown point in the past. You might hear this called the indefinite past tense. But we can also use it to describe actions that started in the past and continue into the present. So let's take a look at an example of an affirmative sentence. These two players have redeemed themselves this season. Okay, so here we might be talking about players who had really bad seasons in the past, but now they're compensating for it, they're making up for it, and they're performing well. Let's look at negative present perfect sentences. To do this, I start with my subject. Based on what that subject is, I'm going to either use have not and then the participle, or has not and then the participle. And you might encounter the contractions haven't and hasn't, like the one here in my example sentence. The former drug dealer hasn't redeemed himself enough to be pardoned. Okay? This is another instance where we hear redeem used quite a lot in our judicial system as we look at releasing people who've been serving sentences in prison. Many times they're looking for, has this person sort of acknowledged their bad behavior, and are they taking steps to not repeat that behavior? Now, let's talk about making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, start with have or has, whichever matches your subject, that subject comes next, then we're going to be using our participle form, the verb. Here's my last example. Have you ever redeemed points for traveling? Right? This is another thing that comes up a lot if you're someone who happens to maybe fly a lot for work. You might be accumulating points and being able to exchange the points for free tickets or for discounts on other tickets. Okay? That question, have you ever, is asking you to kind of like look back all the way in the past up until this moment now, the moment at which I'm speaking. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb redeem. The first word we're going to discuss today is the noun form of our word. It's pronounced redemption. Redemption. Okay? This noun can have a couple different meanings. One way to use the noun is to talk about the action of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil. So very much a religious connection here in this first definition. An example of how you might hear it used. This production tells the story of faith and redemption. Here, maybe we're talking about a play that's at a theater, right? What is it about? Right? So might be talking about, or we might be seeing instances of some character's faith or lack thereof, and eventually maybe how they are saved. Another way to talk or use the noun redemption is to talk about the action of regaining or gaining the possession of something in exchange for payment or in order to clear a debt. An example of this. The company has announced a bond redemption. We might hear this again, bond, you might think of like essentially the company owes the bond holders payment, so they're going to be paying back this debt that they have. Now we'll move on to another related adjective. It's redeemable. Redeemable, and that suffix able is generally a good sign of an adjective, and we can kind of connect our meaning, able to, and then go back to our root word here. So able to be recovered or saved from faults or bad aspects. That's one way to use this adjective. An example of how you might hear this used. Does she have any redeemable qualities? Right? Sometimes I've had a question like that, or asked one similar to that, as people maybe are complaining about other friends or coworkers, right? And I'm really asking, can we find anything positive to focus on? Maybe this person does have many faults, but is there a way we can find some positives, some good things about that person? Another way redeemable gets used is to mean able to be exchanged for goods, discounts, or money. Example of this. Are these bottles redeemable at recycling centers? Now, this can differ based on the location. Where I live, many times if you have a soda bottle, glass bottle, it can be taken back to certain authorized centers. They will give you 5 cents for turning that back in. So that's what that question is asking. Can I turn this bottle in and get money back? One last word for us today, and it's the noun redeemability. This is the capability of being redeemed. So we're back to a noun form here. An example of this noun in a sentence might be, we're going to discuss these characters' redeemability in tomorrow's class. So again, we're back to maybe analyzing a story or some production and really thinking deeply about why characters are acting a certain way, maybe what we can learn from them to better understand the human condition. Thanks again to Louise for suggesting today's verb. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful day.